7.3 part 1 is multiplying rational expressions. We'll get to dividing in 7.2 part 2. Basically, this section is a whole bunch of factoring and simplifying. So when you see something like x squared minus 4x minus 12 over x squared minus 4, we need to factor the top, factor the bottom, and then cancel out anything that is the same. So if we factor this top part, we are looking for two numbers that multiply to give us negative 12 and add up to negative 4. And if you need to write out the blanks so that you can visualize it, go for it. Remember, you focus on the number that you're multiplying by. So we can do 1 times 12, we can do 2 times 6, we can do 3 times 4. Of those options, if we use 2 and 6, we could use 2 and negative 6 to get negative 4. 2 times negative 6 is negative 12. So it is x plus 2 and x minus 6. On the bottom, when we have x squared minus 4, if you want to go about it the same way, you are looking for two numbers that multiply to give you negative 4 and add up to 0, because there's a 0x term in the middle. The only numbers that do that are 2 and negative 2. So this is x plus 2, x minus 2. This type of factoring problem is called a difference of two squares. Notice that x squared is the perfect square of x, and 4 is the perfect square of 2. So the factored form is x plus 2, x minus 2. You take the square root of both of them, one of them plus, one of them minus. Once we get the top and the bottom factored, you need to look for factors that are the same. The factors are the things that are being multiplied together. So the x plus 2 and the x plus 2 match. They cancel. And then we are left with our answer, x minus 6 over x minus 2. I am perfectly fine with you leaving parentheses around it because that will actually help you to not make a mistake. A lot of people look at this answer and think, oh, look, there's an x on the top and there's an x on the bottom, so let's just cancel those out. But you cannot cancel out the x on the top and the x on the bottom because it's it's x minus 6 and it's x minus 2. You can only cancel out factors. Factors are things that are being multiplied. So if this was x times x minus 6, like if it looked like this, if it said x times x minus 6 over x times x minus 2, then yes, you could cancel it. But like this, that is your final answer. There's nothing else you can do. All right, so the next one, I'd like you to pause the video and try the next one on your own. Typically, I don't take the time to write the blanks out to the side. I just think about numbers that multiply to give me negative 6, and if you need to write them down, you can. And then how would those add up to negative 5? You'd think it'd be 2 and 3, but negative 2 times negative 3 is positive 6. So because this is a negative 6, that means it can't be 2 and 3. So it's going to have to be 1 and 6. So I write those numbers in and then I think, okay, to get negative 5, because my answer is negative, the bigger number needs to be negative, the smaller number needs to be positive. On the bottom, x squared minus 1, the square root of x squared is x, the square root of 1 is 1, so it's x plus 1, x minus 1. And then the x plus 1's cancel, so our final answer is x minus 6 over x minus 1. Okay, number 3 is a little bit different. If I factor the top, I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to give me negative 4. That's just 1 times 4 and 2 times 2. And add up to give me 10. That's not possible. The top cannot be factored. So the top is going to stay x squared plus 10x minus 4. I honestly can't remember if that's a typo or if I meant to show you one that can't factor. On the bottom, this bottom does factor into x times x plus 10. So what do the two terms have in common? They have x in common, pull that out. But once we do that, there's nothing in common here. I think the reason I showed you this example is because I wanted you to see that you cannot just cross out the x squared and cross out the 10x and have -4 as your answer. It doesn't work that way. You have to factor. And after you factor, if you've got things that cross out, go for it. But this one, that is all you can do. Nothing is going to cancel on that one. Okay, multiplying rational expressions just means like multiply across the top, multiply across the bottom, and then simplify. This is really, we've done these problems before. This is properties of exponents. So if I multiply across the top, 5 times 6 is 30. X squared times x to the third would be x to the fifth. Remember, you add those exponents together. Y times y squared is y to the third. 2 times 10 is 20. We've got an x, and we've got y to the fourth. Okay, now we've been doing this long enough that I feel like you should be able to kind of take some shortcuts. So first, we've got 30 over 20. Divide both of those by 10, we've got 3 over 2. Now for the x's. X to the fifth over x. This x on the bottom is going to cancel out one of those x's on the top, leaving you with 4 left over. With the y's, these 3 y's on the top are going to cancel out 3 of the 4, leaving you with 1 y left over. So our final answer is 3x to the fourth over 2y. I want you to pause the video and try number 5 on your own. So pause it, pause it, pause it. Okay, you should have gotten 108 x to the 7th y to the 6th over 81 x squared y to the 8th. The 108 over 81, if you need to, type that into your calculator using your fraction buttons to simplify that to the 4/3. With the x's, the 2 x's on the bottom cancel out 2 of the 7, leaving you with 5 x to the 5th left over. The y to the 6th on the top is going to cancel out 6 of the 8 y's on the bottom, leaving you with y squared on the bottom. So that's how that answer happens. If you want to pause the video, you can try this extra problem on your own. I'm going to pause the video and pop the answer up here in just a second. The only thing you really need to note in this problem is that you have y to the 7th on the top and y to the 7th on the bottom, so those completely cancel out, and that's why there are no y's left in that answer. Okay, let's move on to the next page. This is multiply polynomial rational expressions. Now, see how in these examples there's no addition or subtraction symbols. This is like type 1. If there's no addition or subtraction symbols, combine everything on the top, combine everything on the bottom, and then simplify based on that. If you do see addition or subtraction symbols, this means we are going to factor, 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 factor. We're going to factor everywhere we possibly can, and then cancel out common factors. So I will use colors here to help us see everything. I'm going to put one big long division line. 4x squared minus 4x. What do those two terms have in common? They both have 4x. 4x squared divided by 4x is x, and negative 4x divided by 4x is negative 1. So that is the factored form of the first numerator. Now I'll move over here to the second numerator. I am looking for two numbers that multiply to give me negative 6 and add up to 1. So that's probably going to be 2 and 3. It has to add up to positive 1, so the bigger number needs to be positive. If you're trying to add to a positive, the bigger number's positive. If you're trying to add to a negative, the bigger number's negative. So the bigger number is going to match the sign of that middle term. So then it's a minus 2. Now notice I didn't separate this into two different fractions. I'm using one big fraction bar. Both numerators are going to be factored and left on the top. Now our first denominator, we're looking for two numbers that multiply to give us negative 3 and add up to 2. That's going to have to be 1 and 3. Because we're adding up to positive 2, the bigger number needs to be positive. And then 4x, there's not a whole lot we can do with 4x, so 4x is just chilling there. So factor, 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 and now look for things that are the same. So we've got x minus 1 is the same, 4x is the same, x plus 3 is the same. The only thing that is left is x minus 2. So our answer is x minus 2. And I think you would all agree that that is definitely a whole lot simpler than this whole mumbo jumbo that we started with up here. Okay, number 7. I would like you, even though you might be scared to do it, learning happens when you put yourself out there and try. So try number 7. Pause the video, try number 7. I'll come back in just a moment. So pause the video and I'll help you in a moment. X squared minus 1 factors into x plus 1, x minus 1. If we're multiplying to get 1, it's definitely going to be 1 and 1. But, oh shoot, that didn't all come through. That is supposed to be a 12 right there. I don't know why it doesn't show up on there, but it's supposed to be a 12. So when we factor that, we're actually looking for two numbers that multiply to give us 12. It'd probably be 3 and 4. Negative 4 and a positive 3. That's really weird that 2 didn't copy. So if you're totally stumped on that one, I apologize. That's definitely like a typo on the notes. My printed notes have the 12 there, but that's weird. This one is probably 2 times 4. It'd have to be negative 4 and positive 2. And this one, to multiply to get 3, it's going to be 1 times 3. It's a positive 2, so that's a plus 3 and a minus 1. So there's the factored form, fully factored, the whole thing factored. Now we just play the matchy-matchy cancel game. So x plus 1, I don't see an x plus 1 on the bottom. X minus 1, I do see that on the bottom. X plus 3, I see that on the bottom. X minus 4 on the bottom. Our final answer then is x plus 1 over x plus 2. Okay, number 8 is actually exactly the same. It's just you have to do a little bit less work. So, again, this is just over 1. So we're still going to start this out the exact same way. X minus 3, that one's good. It's already factored. Hey, less work. Yay. X squared plus 2x plus 1. That is going to factor into, the only way to multiply to get 1 is 1 times 1, and 1 plus 1 is 2. On the bottom, this one, anytime there's a negative in front, I want you to factor out a negative. And then x cubed plus 3x squared, those have x squared in common. So negative x cubed divided by negative x squared would just be a positive x left over. 3 divided by negative would be negative. X squared divided by x squared would be just 1. And then because the bottom of this other fraction is just a 1, there is a times 1 in there, but do you really need a times 1? No, you really don't. Okay, now let's look at what cancels. X. Does anything cancel? Oh, the x minus 3. Oh my goodness, what did I do right here? You guys gotta tell me when I make mistakes. 3x squared divided by negative x squared is negative 3. Whew, that's what cancels. The x minus 3 cancels. Okay, now our answer here, we've got x plus 1 and x plus 1 on the top. Those are exactly the same, so you can put squared. On the bottom, we have x squared, and we have a negative, but it doesn't matter where in the fraction the negative goes. It's best to put it on the top. Okay, I'd like you to pause the video. I only have 30 seconds left. Try number 9. Oh, big thing about number 9. It's 4 terms. Do you remember how you have to split that? Split that, factor the first group, factor the second group. I will show all of my work and pop it up here in the last 20 seconds. So over here in this squiggly box is kind of a step-by-step how you factor that group of 4. I don't think there's any of those on in your assignment. And then here's the factored form, and it's a little convoluted, but you end up with 2 of these x plus 1s, and the only thing that cancels is the x plus 5.